Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Marnese Live Talkshow. Tonight, we will continue to discuss COVID-19 and how it has hit everyone in an emotional, physical, financial, and mental type of way. We will have a conversation with Dr. Theresa Johnson, Andrea Cardenas, Michael Imhotep, Caleb Boswell, on what it is like experiencing the coronavirus. Working on the front lines, the mental, physical, emotional, and economic impact it has had on low income and communities of color. So I would like to welcome you to the Marnese Live Talk Show, where we can have an authentic conversation about social issues and life issues in hopes to move our community and our society forward. But before I welcome our guests in, please let me tell you about them. We have Dr. Theresa Johnson, who is a board-certified family nurse practitioner, currently based in New York City, working in Brooklyn for the COVID pandemic. She was born and raised in Pontiac, Michigan. She attended the University of Michigan for undergrad and the University of Rochester in New York for her nursing degree and master's degree. She received her doctorate from Chamberlain College of Nursing in 2018. She has been a registered nurse for 9 years and a nurse practitioner for the last 5 years. She is passionate about increasing access to healthcare for low-income and minority communities. She also has a 3-year-old son named Maxwell, who is the light of her life. So let me introduce you to Michael Imhotep. He is the founder of the African History Network and host of the African History Network show on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF Detroit. He is the former host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Michael Imhotep Show, on the Empowerment Radio Network. He is also a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. He has guest hosted national radio shows, including the Warren Ballantine Show and the Roland Martin Show. Michael has over 40 lectures on DVD dealing with African and African American history, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, and issues pertaining to the African American community. Mr. Caleb Boswell has a passion for mental wellness and education. He is currently a student advisor in the Office Counseling and Career Planning at Washtenaw Community College, as well as served as a part-time instructor. Also at WCC, he is the facilitator for Brother to Brother, a program for underrepresented males on campus, and is the co-facilitator of the college's Collegiate Recovery Program, which serves students that are in recovery from substance abuse. He has done presentations on mental wellness and often uses his social media outlets to promote mental wellness and the benefits of therapy with the hashtag therapy is normal. He is a proud Central Michigan University alum where he double majored in psychology and communication, and also earned a master's degree in college counseling from Eastern Michigan University. And Andrea Cardenas is the youngest of 3 and was born into an immigrant working class household. She graduated from the University of California, Riverside, and receiving her Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science with a minor in Public Policy. Andrea currently serves as a director of Political and Community Affairs for Grassroots Resources, where she helps community connects and nonprofit organizations with different government organizations and agencies. Andrea resides in Chula Vista, California, where she is currently running to be elected as the next councilwoman for the City First 4th District. So let me welcome all of our guests in to the Marnese Live Talk Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Marnese Live Talk Show.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you guys quite well.
All right, good, thanks.
All right.
How's everybody doing?
Good, how are you guys?
All right, so while I have you guys in the waiting room, I was doing a wonderful bio that you guys sent me, and you guys have some really good background. So how about we do a round of introductions to each other? Where you from? How many kids? And how has COVID impacted you? So who'd like to go first?
All right, I can roll. So, my name is Caleb Boswell. I am a LLPC, and I work in the Office of Counseling and Career Planning at a local community college. How many kids do I have? 0. What have I been doing since COVID? This has just been just me. So it's definitely been an experience, just trying to stay connected and make it through.
Thank you so much, Caleb, and welcome to the Marnese Live Talkshow.
Thank you.
Go next. Andrea Cardenas. I am from Chula Vista, California, which is the second largest city in the county of San Diego. I am a political consultant. I'm currently running for office. I don't have children other than my wonderful little dog and a ton of plants. I actually was diagnosed with COVID back in March. So that was the impact that it had on my life. I was very public about my diagnosis, given that I am running for office and the fact that I am just very active in my community. I thought it was very important for me to be very transparent about that. And that's how the impact it had with me.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and welcome. And I'm so happy that you're recovered and your family is doing really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So I'm gonna pass it back to the ladies, okay? I'm gonna go to Theresa Johnson.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Theresa Johnson, and I am a nurse practitioner. I actually have a 3-year-old little boy named Max. I started dealing with COVID first in Detroit. I was working at a hospital there, and it went from our first patient to hundreds of patients within a matter of a couple of weeks. And it was like a crash course. We were not short-staffed. We had adequate personal protective equipment, and we acquired some new skills along the way. So I felt compelled to help out in New York City, which is where I am now, just solely based off of seeing the nurses and doctors on TV telling their stories, crying in tears, and knowing what it feels like to work short-staffed, and just kind of feeling their pain and feeling like I had a skill and I could help. So I am out here now, witnessing everything that's going on the front lines. Mm-hmm. And that's how it's affected me.
Thank you so much, Theresa. And you're in New York, so you really are on the front lines in Brooklyn.
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn.
Wow.
All right. So last but not least, Mr. Michael, tell us about you.
All right. Well, look, thanks for having me. I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So I've been studying coronavirus going back to mid to late January this year. And I first started talking about it on my radio show. I do radio here in Detroit, 9, 10 a.m. to Superstation WFDF. The African History Network show every Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also broadcast on my Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. First started talking about it on my show as in the A block as a lead story March 1st. And it's basically been a lead story pretty much each Sunday since then. And, so people who watch me know, I say, while people were talking about Jada Pinkett Smith and Snoop Dogg and Gail and Oprah and Kobe and things like this, I was studying coronavirus because I saw what was coming. And I studied the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. And if you study that, the most violent wave was the second wave that came in late 1918. Then the third wave came in early 1919. And 675,000 people in the U.S. died, and between 50 million to 100 million worldwide died. Okay. So how has it affected me? It's affected, it's been hard because I have friends of mine who passed away. One of my teachers, Ahati Kalendi Ii, who's a master of African martial arts, and I've interviewed him a number of times, and he traveled all around the world. He passed away about a month and a half ago from it. I've had friends who I went to high school with, and one in particular, both her parents were in the hospital at the same time with COVID-19, and she was a wreck. She didn't know whether they were going to make it or not. Luckily, they both survived, and they're both back home. But she did a couple of Facebook Live videos, you know, and she couldn't go see them at the hospital either, because those that are familiar with this, because of the lack of personal protection equipment, in general, you can't go see people who are in the hospital with coronavirus. So there've been a number of people here in Detroit, prominent people. A lot of them I've known, or I knew people who knew them, who passed away from it. So it's been horrific. And then we know at least 6 million African Americans have lost their jobs in the past 9 weeks also. 38.9 million, 38.6 million as of today lost their jobs in the past 9 weeks. At least 6 million African Americans have lost their jobs also. So, I mean, this has been horrific, but it was largely avoidable also, by the way. That's a whole nother.
Yeah, we're going to get more into that later in the show. So I want to go to Andrea, and since you were infected with the virus, tell us, were you nervous to disclose the information since you're running for political office, and what has been the impact on your family?
So for me, I mean, the path for me to find out whether or not I had it was a little rocky. I mean, we were coming off of the primary election here, which was on March 3rd. And right after that, there was like a lot of events, and there's a lot of things going on, which are natural, you know, for us to kind of get together and do all of that stuff, victory parties, or whatnot. And there was just a lot of natural interaction. It was on March 9th that I started having like a fever. And I, you know, I tend to like kind of crash after big events. I've been involved politically since I was very, very young. I was around 14. And so for me, I was like, oh, you know, I have like a cold. But obviously at that point, I started seeing everything that was going on in the news. So I was a little bit more cautious than normal. However, both of my parents are older, and both of my parents are sick. So for me, I was just a little bit more cognitive of the situation and conscious that maybe I should just stay away from them just to be safe. And I remember my mom calling me several times and be like, Mija, I'll go take you soup, or what do you need? Do you want me to go stay with you, or you should come over, like, you know, like you sound worse than normal? And I'm like, no, like it's fine, you know. And it took a few days, and you know, I just did normal home remedies until it wasn't until like a few days later where my shortness of breath started coming in, and that was just odd. And so I finally went into urgent care, and they were like, we think it's just pneumonia. They did a chest x-ray, they gave me medicine for pneumonia. And sorry, that's my dog. And so they gave me medicine for pneumonia, and they gave me the whole conversation about how limited we were with tests. And so they said, you know, we could test you, but so, you know, we have very limited tests, and you don't know of anyone that you've been around that has tested positive. And so obviously understanding the situation we were in, I was like, it's fine, you know, like I live by myself, I just self-isolate. And so they were like, if you do know of anybody that you've been around. It ended up being that I did find out that I had been exposed to someone that had tested positive. And so a few days later, I go in, I test, and there was a huge backlog in our county. And I didn't end up finding out that I was positive until 10 days later. By the time that I found out that I was positive, so I got tested on the 16th, and I exhibited symptoms on the 9th. I got tested on the 16th, and I didn't find out until the 26th that I was positive. By then, there were so many other people around me that had tested positive that I was just like, I was like, it would have been like the biggest miracle that I wasn't, you know, COVID positive. And so I had just completely self-isolated. I had stayed away from my entire family. At that point, like I had conversations with my parents. I had conversations with my siblings, with my niece, my nephew. And I told them, you know what, I'm going to be fine. Like, you know, for the most part, like I'm healthy. Like there's nothing that, you know, and now we know like that doesn't really help a lot of people, you know, it's, but we have such limited information. And back in March, we had even less, that you are in this weird position of having to kind of be the support system for your family, in a way, because they can't be there to comfort you, and you also don't really know what to say to them. And so so for me, it was very much like, I'll be fine, like you don't have to come. And you know, with my culture, it's very much like, let's go, like let's all, you know, figure out how we're gonna, you know, make sure that you're fine. And the idea or the thought of like you have to stay away is so hard to grasp. And so there was this knowledge of like, my parents were like, what can we do for you? I'm like, the best thing you can do for me is stay away, because how much worse would it be if you got sick? I can't even imagine. You know, my dad goes to dialysis 3 times a week. My mom suffers from fibromyalgia and all of, you know, these other issues that would have just made this so much worse. So to have them understand that was a challenge, but luckily they did, and I didn't have to fight with them too much, you know, which I know that a lot of people my age and a lot of my friends did. You know, a lot of their parents they're still fighting with them to not go to the grocery stores and to not do all of these other things. And I think for my parents, it hit them quickly, right? Like, okay, one of our own is down. And so there was a big mental strain on, we can't be there for each other physically, but it became a lot of like, let's check in on each other regularly. Like every, you know, 2 hours there was phone calls and stuff like that. So it was a lot of that.
Thank you so much.
Just a preparation. Yeah.
Thanks so much for telling us that. And so I wanted to ask Theresa, since you're on the front lines, one, what was it like leaving, you know, your son, and then also seeing all the patients, if you can tell us that, like, you know, what has been your process during this time?
So initially, when this all started, I had my 3-year-old son, and I don't think anybody knew the road we were headed down with this. I remember his dad asking me, I know you always think about him and you have his best interests at heart, but what are you thinking right now? Do you feel like it's safe you coming home to him every day? And at first I just had to, you know, kind of take a step back and say like, wow, like what would it be like to be separated from my 3-year-old? So I kind of went back and forth with it. And by about the second day that I was off for the weekend, and when I went back to work on Monday, it was such a drastic change from Friday to Monday, to where they were saying, oh, we probably have our first positive, to now the hospital has intubation kits just thrown around on every unit, because there's so many emergent intubations where you have to put patients on ventilators. And I'm now the person making this decision that it's time to intubate this person, and having these conversations. I had to call him from work in tears and tell him, you know what, I don't feel like it's safe for me to come home to my 3-year-old. I would hate for something to happen to him and have to live with the fact that, you know, it was me who exposed him to it. We didn't know enough about it. Like she was saying, every time we came back to work, they were telling us new things. At first, I remember when they were telling us, no, don't wear a mask. If you're not in a patient's room that is confirmed positive, don't wear a mask. It's not necessary. And I just remember going from that Friday to Monday, and I got an email saying a patient that you admitted into the hospital was not showing symptoms at the time, started showing symptoms. They tested the patient was positive, and I was in close contact. So that was initially like, you know, a shocking finding So even at that time, they didn't tell me to take off time from work. They didn't tell me to, they were trying, I think, not to alarm the staff. They just said, wear a mask 24/7 while you're at the hospital. And, if you start to show symptoms, let us know. So I don't really think any of us knew what to expect or what we were in for at that time. That was one of the most difficult things that I had to do is leave my son. I've been in New York for 7 weeks, and I was dealing with COVID for about 3 weeks or so in Detroit before I left. So you do the math on when the last time I've seen him besides FaceTime, and every day he calls me. He's like, "Mommy, there are still more sick people. Are you still in York? How many sick people are there?" But my family's been super supportive. He loves superheroes right now, so he loves saying, "My mommy's a superhero too. She's helping all the sick people." So that's been my hardest thing. Outside of having to adapt, and the hospital settings are absolutely unimaginable. I would say that it's worse than anything you've ever seen on the TV because they will only show you so much on TV. We didn't know what to expect coming to New York. We were like, what is it going to be like? The first day they dropped us in the emergency room, the patients were stacked, like almost like bumper cars is how I can describe it. So in a normal like cubby area where there would be like one patient in an emergency room, there's 3 to 4 stacked next to each other. With patients, 3 to 4 on the other side, you're literally like, what patient am I looking for? Like you're checking wristbands and you're like, if there was an emergency back here on the patient in the corner, how are you getting back there? It was 125 patients and I believe like a 60 bed ER and patients in the waiting room and patients outside. We ended up having to open up a tent outside the hospital, a COVID tent, because it was just unimaginable. Staff were falling ill. Staff were already out when we got here. Nurses would normally have maybe 4 or 5 patients, maybe 6 on a bad day. They were taking care of 15 patients. How do you even, that in itself is stressful, and you never want to feel like you're put in a situation where you can't provide adequate care to a patient. You're literally stretched so thin. I just remember walking around checking patients' oxygen saturations one day and finding almost every patient hypoxic. There were so many patients on oxygen that all the machines were constantly beeping. And when we asked why are the machines beeping, they said, there's not enough pressure support on the hospital system to support this many patients being on oxygen.
Wow.
So that, and the family experience, having to, I don't know what it's like. Thankfully, my family, I think I've scared them so much that they stayed in the house. They are on complete quarantine because they hear my stories every day. So, I don't know what that's like, but I can only imagine, the first couple of weeks I just cried every minute because I have to have these conversations with family members. They can't be here with their loved ones, which is complete opposite, how we normally deal with family members in the hospital. So we're having phone conversations and difficult conversations saying, I need to put your loved one to sleep and put them on a ventilator to let them breathe for themselves, and they're hysterical. Sometimes you have to call them back and tell them that they didn't make it. And it's very difficult for them to understand without being able to be there and see it with their own 2 eyes. There's some doubt as to if people are doing everything that they can do for the patients, and just a real unsettled feeling that I feel like looms over all of us. Now they have video face chats, but that's a newer phenomenon.
Thanks so much, Theresa. And I wanted to ask Caleb, since he's in the, mental health and counseling field, what have you heard since you hear someone who's impacted by COVID and then someone's on the front line away from their families, crying every day because they want to see, their son? Like, what have you heard out in, the community of how people are dealing with this? And how are you dealing with this?
I would say one of the biggest things that I've been seeing is disruption and people struggling with the disruption that's going on with their life. And so, in my personal case, when I went to work on March 13th, you wouldn't have told me that would have been my last day. Like, I literally had something to do and was like, oh, I'll catch up on that on Monday. Well, there wasn't a Monday. I never went back. And so for a lot of people, they're struggling with the disruption. I work at the college, and so I deal with a lot of traditional and non-traditional age students. But I reached a point where, I reached out to a colleague and I said, I'm doing more brief counseling than talking academics. I'm having my meetings with my students, and we're not talking about the semester. I'm dealing with my unemployment. My job is gone. My parent is sick. I think I may be sick. I'm struggling staying here. I don't know where my next check is coming from. Mm-hmm. And so dealing with, people are trying to adjust and deal with this major disruption that is happening in their life. For a lot of people, another issue has been isolation, because there are some people like myself who are doing it on their own. So they don't have children, they don't have a spouse. And so oftentimes with isolation, because you don't have the distractions of work, your commute, school, all the day-to-day things, depression and anxiety is starting to bubble up more because those distractions of going to the gym and those things that you usually do aren't there. And so that big white elephant in the room is getting bigger and bigger. And so I'm seeing a lot of people who are, trying to come to terms and trying to figure out what's kind of going on. And if they've never been diagnosed formally with depression or anxiety, they may be thinking like, yo, I may be experiencing those symptoms at this time. Mm-hmm. So I would say the biggest thing that I've noticed during this experience is just the disruption and people trying to navigate what that disruption looks like. Because as the lady said, we don't have a lot of information on this. We didn't kind of really know. We're kind of figuring it out as we go along. Mm-hmm. And so you have people who are like, will I be starting school in the fall? Will I be going back to work? How long will my unemployment be going? They just released here in Michigan some of the strategies of what they're looking to do to try to do with the school year. And what I've seen is most people are going, how am I even going to make that possible? How am I going to make that schedule even doable to do 2 days on, 3 days off, half days, mask, gloves, don't touch. I mean, we all know, as students in school, you're constantly in contact with people. Yo, let me see your pen. Oh, do you got the notes from last night? All these different things. And so, they're trying to make it where there's all this social distancing within the school, and that's going to be, extremely difficult. And so, like I said, people are just really struggling trying to figure it out because, so often as people, we go, okay, if this is what's happening, let me make a plan. Let me do A, plus B, to C to try to make something happen. But when you can't see beyond the day, it makes things a little bit more difficult.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was on a call from my church and school district about the plan if they can go back to school. And I'm sitting here like, even though I have the luxury of working from home, I'm still sitting here like, kids are gonna really have a hard time.
I mean, one of the biggest struggles that we've had is that a lot of the schools are like, oh, we just won't be in school. We'll just go remote. Everybody doesn't have high-speed internet. Everybody doesn't have access to a laptop. Everybody's laptop doesn't have a camera on it. And so it's so layered in regards to the struggles that we're dealing with.
Thank you. So Michael, with you studying this way before, right, 2020, right?
Early this year, January this year.
January. Okay. 2020, January. Mm-hmm. What have you actually, some of the findings that you have found economically that is impacting low-income communities of color? And you're in Detroit, so it's getting hit really hard in Detroit. So could you talk more about that?
Well, it's hitting on a number of different levels, especially African Americans and Hispanics. It's hitting on a number of different levels. First of all, if we look at, I'll give you some citations here because people who watch my show know I'm surrounded by probably about 300, 400 printed up articles. Mm-hmm. Back in March, I was talking about how this was going to disproportionately impact African-American workers because a lot of African-American and Hispanic workers are on the front lines, not just in healthcare, but whether they work for FedEx, UPS, whether they're in retail, things like this. So if we go back to March 12, 2020, Yahoo News Finance.yahoo.com had an article coronavirus to impact low-wage Black workers the most. Okay. And one of the things that it talked about was that only about a third of Americans can work from home. And it talked about a disproportionate number of African-American Hispanics who can't work from home, who have to show up to work. Another thing that we see is, just briefly, the meat packing plants. Okay. There was an article today, in the last couple of days, that dealt with how at a Tyson meat packing plant, 600 people were diagnosed with coronavirus. Okay, I posted this early this morning, and we see that in the meat packing plants, disproportionately, we see African Americans and Hispanics working there. Okay, and what's happening is that it's hitting on so many different levels. When we look at 38.6 million people have lost their jobs in 9 weeks, right? Millions of those people have lost their health insurance also. That's not really being talked about a lot. Okay, so you have a global pandemic taking place, and we see African Americans are hit disproportionately catching coronavirus because of pre-existing conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, things like this. And when we look in Detroit, Detroit has about a 40% poverty rate. If it goes down, it's because of gentrification. It ain't because it's getting better. Okay, it's because poor people being pushed out of Detroit and more affluent other people, white people, things like this are moving in. And just be honest with you. But we see that in Detroit, for instance, you had Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who ordered the turning back on of water that was shut off in people's homes, because we still have people without water here. So when the CDC is saying wash your hands, well, it's hard to do it if you don't have running water. Yeah, you can use hand sanitizer, but still, so we're dealing with these challenges. And then on top of that, we see the attack on the city budget. Okay. So for instance, because of and I'm not blaming Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I think, and I agree with what she's doing in general, because of the stay-at-home order, we know the 3 casinos here in Detroit shut down: Motor City, MGM Grand, and Greektown. Well, they pay the city of Detroit $600,000 a day in taxes. Okay, so because the city wasn't getting the money in taxes, quite naturally, the Mayor Mike Duggan had to cut back the budget. So they had to cut $348 million from the budget. So that means cutting back on people's hours, possibly laying off people. So we see just a total ripple effect. And I haven't really heard any numbers on how it's affecting the homeless population here in Detroit either. I'm not sure about that. But it's had a devastating impact here in Detroit.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Andrea, I had a question, like, what is different for you now? You're running for an elected office. Do you see your platform changing to lift up economics, healthcare, especially on a local level, and disaster preparedness? Because when you think about the pandemic, it is preparing our people for a disaster. So have you switch things up within your platform?
Yeah, definitely. So the demographics of my district are, we are definitely the most impacted by this, have been the most impacted by COVID-19, because our region is the most Latino, the most African American, and the most disenfranchised from the rest of the city. So that's where you have most of the essential workforce is coming out of my district. And so I think that for me specifically, it's very important that that's something that we're highlighting as part of the platform, is the fact that we need to be bringing in more resources to this community and to my district, because these are the people that are still at the front lines, regardless of what's going on, and regardless of everything that is happening, they still have to be showing up to work every day. It's just what Michael was saying right now. These are the people that are impacted day in and day out, because they can't be doing their work from home. They're grocery workers, they're truck drivers, they are out in the fields. These are people that they can't, they don't have the luxury to be home like many of us do. Like I have the luxury of being able to work from home, but that's not the majority of my district. And so economic development and making sure that we are building on the digital divide that is hurting a lot of our students in my district that can't, we're doing a lot of this virtual stuff and trying to, and schooling and all of that. But internet and all of these things are still affecting the quality of the education that they're receiving. And so it's definitely changed that. And for me, it's that's part of the reason why I was extremely transparent in coming out and saying, this impacted me, and this is how, and I became infected with COVID-19 before we even knew like how to like protect ourselves from it. And now that we do, we need to avoid it. And so unfortunately, my district continues to have an increase of numbers because there are essential workers and they are the most exposed. And so how can we, as people that are not having to work out every day out in the grocery stores and all this, how can we help make sure that they are safe? And that's been a huge part of my message. And for me right now, it's just been, making sure that I am healthy and strong enough to make sure that I'm out there and doing as much as I can to make sure that that message is resonating with the community. So definitely changed the way that we've been seeing things. We also have in my region a huge board of supervisors race that's happening, and that has shifted as well, whereas there was some other issues that were coming back and forth, and now it's all about county health, and so I think it's definitely changed and shaped a lot of what the local political vision has been, and I'm glad, because it's something that we need to be looking at, the disparities in our communities and all of the nonprofits, all the work that they've been doing for years that hasn't been seen. And so it definitely has changed how everything has been looked at, and I'm glad because it needed to be seen.
Thank you. And Theresa, Dr. Johnson, excuse me. How is your mental health, right? Like, have you been in some compromising situations since you've been on the front lines? Like, and how do you take care of yourself?
I've definitely been in some difficult and or compromising situations. Even listening to their perspectives is bringing back like different thoughts and conversations, because I like to talk to people. So I want to hear everyone's perspective, and everyone is dealing with it so different. And you might not even be aware of, my story and my struggles are completely different than, the person I might even be working along next to. So for my mental health, I actually think it's okay for now. Now ask me in 6 months after I've sat down, processed everything, and recalled everything that I've seen, because to some extent, I think we've learned how to suppress what we see. We have to, because in the beginning, when we first got here and people were having patient assignments, and at the end of the day, all of their patients have died. Having to deal with that on a daily basis, I don't know how many people can deal with that, or seeing the, I don't even know how many trucks there are now, but the freezer trucks, so many of them, and coming to work like, oh, it's the third freezer truck that, it's still, you just don't really know how you're going to deal with it. So I kind of stick to the routine and try to bring back some of home here with me. So some of the things I do at home, I do here. I wake up in the morning, I pray, I say my affirmations. I ask for strength and clarity and peace of mind, and the ability to think clearly and critically as I go throughout my day. I've been trying to incorporate working out a little bit in my small little hotel room. It pretty much anything you can. And it's tough for me because like I try not to watch the news.
Okay.
And I had to learn that it's okay to tell people I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
Because I know people care and so many people call and they want to check on me, but they also want to know, well, what does it look like out there?
Right.
Well, what did you see today? Is it really as bad as it looks? Is it getting better? You know, in some conversations, it can be a lot when you're dealing with it for 12, 14 hours, 6 to 7 days a week at work. And then to come home and do that, you have to kind of grab the little bits and pieces of happiness and hold on to them. Like my 3-year-old, I still try and, you know, take part in some of his play throughout the day. Like when I want to break, I'll FaceTime him and play with him virtually. He wears his Power Ranger mask, which is way cooler than my face gear that I have on. And then I try to read bedtime stories with him. All those little things to get your mind off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, having those conversations and connecting with the people that you're working with, the people who live here, like we get to go home at some point and have some sense of, I don't know if it's normalcy, but, you know, it's definitely not is what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of the nurses that we are working alongside of are, some of them have not received hazard pay.
Mm-hmm.
They've been off sick. Some people arguing because in the beginning, they were not testing people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, some people, they're making you almost prove that you have it, but then they won't test you. And they don't want to pay accordingly, you know, to you being off and the fact that you contracted it at work. Where else have you been but at work every day? And these people are saying, you know, yeah, they're not putting us out of our homes now, but like in Brooklyn, there's a lot of Hispanic, Russian, Jamaican, Haitian population, a lot of minorities, a lot of frontline workers. So if they're laid off, some of them, whether they're truck drivers, construction workers, all these people, you know, the nurses are like, my husband is not working. I can't afford to pay New York City rent and, you know, without that income. So what does this look like afterwards? So you mean to tell me I had to work on the front lines and risk my life, my family's life, and what, I'm homeless at the end of this? Those are tough conversations to have. And we have all these different burdens that we're putting on people and still expecting them to be able to come to work and take care of other people. Mm-hmm. And although my mental health is great today, there are some days where it's not. And you just have to realize it's okay to not be okay, but then we're still asking so much of other people to be able to come to work mm-hmm. and take care of others. You have to be able to, you know, try and like lift each other up. And when you know somebody else is having a bad day, I've seen it so much, just people like pouring into the other people and asking them, you know, what do you need? How can I help you? People sharing resources amongst staff and just pretty much coming together to try and help each other out. Because right now, I think one of the things we've all learned from the pandemic is to lean on other people. Mm-hmm. I've definitely seen a lot of people coming together. My sorority sisters, Zeta Phi Beta, have definitely really kind of,
okay.
You know.
I know you were Zeta. I'm a Sigma.
Well, hello. I'm
trying not to do that.
Well, you know.
Well, you know.
They've been instrumental. Like I receive so many care packages, and even when I don't know the stuff is, you know, expected, like I don't care what it is, and I'm able to share, you know, all this stuff with the people that I'm working around. They've sent food, water, lunches, money, everything. So I just feel like, you know, blessed to be able to share resources and to even feel that support. I'm just so grateful for the support. That helps my mental.
Thank you so much, Theresa. So as we close, I wanted to know from each one of you, what gives you hope and what are some recommendations for moving forward that you can provide people who are struggling mentally, spiritually, emotionally, financially? What can you give hope? Because we don't really know what's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. So what can we get people to lean into? And Michael, would you like to go first?
All right. And I had a quick question for Theresa also.
Okay, go ahead.
But well, let me go with the question. The question I had is, explain the difference between the N95 masks that doctors and nurses wear in hospitals and the masks that people may buy in stores, things like that. What's like the main difference between them?
Great question.
So the main difference, and why you see we actually wear two masks. We wear them both. We wear the N95 respirator because it protects us from droplet, airborne things. So when we have to, once we put a tube down a patient's throat, it aerosolizes the virus into the air. Now, in a normal situation before COVID, we use these masks with like tuberculosis patients who are supposed to be in negative pressure rooms. You know, it's a really strict precaution so that it does not get out of the room and into the air elsewhere. Okay, now fast forward to COVID, where we don't have enough negative pressure rooms. We don't even have enough rooms, period. We have patients just out in the open in the emergency room. So now why is your staff sick? Because it's just COVID air at this point. So we wore the respirator to try and protect us from all those droplets in the air. We wear the other mask, which you see like the regular
surgical mask.
Because the thought is that with proper distance and two people wearing the mask, it will protect the other person. It protects you too and the other person. So we wear both because the respirator will protect us, and then wearing the extra one protects anything that we may have, you know, transmitted.
From being transmitted to the other person. Okay. All right. So first part of your question is like, what's to come? What do I expect? Was that the first part, Marnese?
That, and what gives you hope? Like, what can you help people prepare? Because I hear there's going to be a spike in cases. We actually really don't know what's
already happening now. In a lot of these states that are opened up because they listen to Donald Trump, they're already seeing a spike. Okay, so here's what's happening. Number one, if we look at Washington Post had the article today where states are reopening after America shut down. People should read that from Washington Post. He's gonna get a lot of people killed. I'm just telling you, because Georgia, Florida, these Republican states are opening up too quickly, and a lot of those people are listening to him not wearing masks, not practicing social distancing. And if you go back to the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, the Great Pandemic, when different cities approached it differently. But what happened was when in one city, I think it was San Francisco, when the third wave came, the third wave hit them harder because previously they were wearing the masks and practicing social distancing. They thought the mask was what was protecting them, but it was social distancing. So when the third wave came, they stopped social distancing. They kept wearing the mask, and it really hit them hard. We're going to see the same thing here.
So you're recommending that people continue practicing social distancing?
Absolutely. Keep practicing social distancing. Wear the mask to reduce the spread of it also.
Okay.
And then stay healthy as well. And don't, you stay at home as much as possible because, you know, I was out, you know, with my job. I'm out, but I'm wearing a mask also. And I'm looking at people not practicing social distancing. I'm here in Detroit, you know, the weather's pretty nice. I'm looking at people just acting like everything's normal. And I'm like, no, a lot of these people are going to get hit. And yes, you may survive, but what will you go through with the sickness? And the other thing is that early on, and we didn't talk about it, but Dr. Johnson may want to talk about this. Early on, you had conspiracy theorists saying Black people couldn't get it. Then they wanted to blame it on 5G. And now we see TheGuardian.com, the Guardian just had an article yesterday, May 20th, that talks about Black Americans dying of COVID-19 at 3 times the rate of white people. And this is nationally, but there are some states where, like the state of Michigan, African Americans, the state of Michigan and Missouri, African Americans die at 5 times the rate of white people. Okay. But so then we look at the underlying causes: diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. Okay. Which makes you, which in COVID really exposes all of this. So some of the things that make me hopeful, because personally, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, just to tell you the truth. And
okay.
just,
So so what's going to make you hopeful, even though things may get worse?
So to make me hopeful, one is voting Donald Trump out of office.
Okay. So everybody
one, because people are seeing relationship between a dereliction, between a president who does not read his presidential daily briefings.
Okay.
A president who has declared war on the scientists, and they see consequences, and they see how these actions have deadly consequences, and it's going to continue. Okay, so that number one. Number two is hopefully we'll learn from history, because if we study, and I've done videos dealing with the history of the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. If we study that history, we can learn a lot from it and protect ourselves from it as well. And then also, hopefully, with the task force that are being started, looking at why African Americans are disproportionately hit, like the task force here in Michigan, it's a task force in New York, things like this. Hopefully, positive policies will come from that to address those health disparities.
Thank you so much, Michael. Caleb, bring us home. What gives you hope, and what are some recommendations that you can give our listeners?
So the good thing is, Theresa, it was good to hear the things that you're doing, because to be honest with you, you're doing the right thing. Many of the things that you said were many of the things that I was going to suggest. And so one of the things that's extremely important is to stay connected. I'm a firm believer in balance. And so you don't have to hit every Zoom meeting. You don't have to hit every phone call. There's nothing wrong with saying, no, I just need some time to myself. But I'm just a firm believer in balance. So if you need a day or two to get yourself together, cool. But what you don't want to do is realize that you're isolating yourself. So now you're not picking up the phone. Now you're not returning calls. Now you're not returning emails. And now you're going into isolation. You don't want to do that, because then that can lead to things like depression and anxiety and things of that nature. But I'm also saying, on the other end, you don't have to go to every party. And so you want to make sure that you have balance. And the fact that you are, connecting and reaching out to people. Exercise before and after COVID, no matter what. There are plenty of studies out there that talks about the benefits of exercise in regards to depression, anxiety, and mental health, how beneficial it is. I can't even lie. I miss the gym. I struggle trying to work out at home. It's not happening. But prior to COVID, I'm in the gym 7:30, 8 o'clock, Monday through Thursday before work. So I can't wait to get that normalcy and get that back to my life. Another thing is, take some personal time. If you have the ability, if you are blessed to be working from home, a lot of times our jobs are putting individuals under pressure and have the expectation for people to still produce like we're under normal circumstances. We're not under normal circumstances. And so with that being said, I always say, I said on my Twitter, I jokingly said on my Facebook, use that PTO time. If you got PTO time, if you got vacation time, use it. Take some time to disconnect, because I'm a firm believer. You cannot pour into others when you're empty yourself. And so you want to take that time and use it for yourself. As we see, if we take a day off, if we're not there, the show will go on. So I know they give us pressure to say, you need to be here and we need you and this, that, and the third. Again, I'm about balance. I'm not saying slack off and take 2-3 weeks off at a time, but I'm also saying sometimes you just need a day. Sometimes you need 2 days. Sometimes you may need a week. Whatever you have under your belt, utilize that time and take some time to disconnect. I know for me personally, with my job, I have a Google Voice number that I use so my students can have my real number. And that's one of the things that I look forward to when I take a day off. I don't get on my email at all. Just like when you had emailed me and I didn't get it for a couple of days, I was like, yo, Marnese, I'm sorry. When I disconnect. So when I disconnect, I don't check that email. I turn that Google Voice number off on my phone. And like Theresa, very similar. I'm not trying to look at the news. I'm on YouTube. I'm on on Facebook. I'm trying to look at things that are bringing me joy, that are bringing me happiness. And then when I have to go back and jump back in the fire, I'm a little bit more recharged. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Use that time, try to recharge, listen to yourself, listen to your body. Again, there are going to be times where you're going to have to push it, but there are some days where you have to just be like, this ain't it. This is not the day. So let me take a mental health day and get myself in order.
Thank you so much, Caleb. And thanks for the reminder. Use that time. I got time. All right, Andrea, what would you like to leave our viewers?
You know what? I am very conscious of the fact that I am extremely fortunate. You know, I had peers that, you know, they ended up in the hospital on ventilators. We didn't know whether or not they were going to make it. Luckily, you know, the majority of the people that I know are fine, some with some complications, but I was blessed. I was blessed that, you know, I have a support system that I was able to touch on and reach out to. And it was hard. And like a lot of what was mentioned was that, you know, that it's that isolation that it's very easy to withdraw to, but it's that constant reminder of like, you have to kind of make it a point to make sure that you are connecting with other people. I'm hopeful, because like I said earlier, like this did highlight the real discrepancies and the lack of attention that a lot of our underserved communities have received for decades. This isn't, you know, a lot of these communities haven't received the proper attention for years, and this has just really amplified that. And I think that, and I'm hopeful that this is going to be a first step for a lot of our policymakers to really look at that and make some positive changes there. And people are looking at it now, and voters and people who maybe weren't as engaged before are going to see how this is really affecting them, because it's very easy to go about your life when there isn't a big shock. But this kind of shocked everybody to the core, and I'm hopeful that that's going to bring about real and lasting change in our community, that we needed. You know, a lot of people talking about like we can't wait to go back to normal, but the normal that we were living in really wasn't okay for so many people. We were just complacent, and I think that I'm hopeful that, you know, that has happened, and it's just, you know, we have this saying and with our community, and my community is like, we only see each other at funerals, right? And it's that similar thing of like, we had to have something so big happen for us to really see how hard so many of us have been afflicted by the system for so long. And I'm hopeful that this is going to bring about a new day, a new change, and a new normal, because the normal that we've been living in hasn't been beneficial to so many people. And I'm hoping it's going to activate so many people to vote and get new leadership in the White House and new leadership at all levels of government, because locally and statewide, and I have no complaints about my statewide office. You know, our governor is great. But in the state, you know, in the White House, it's so frustrating to see that that we're not having a leadership that we can depend on. And so I'm hoping that, you know, we do have people that are more conscious that politics is in everything that we do, and it's in every step of the way, and it's in every aspect of our lives, and people will, you know, start being more engaged in that. And so there is hope for me in that, and hopefully people will get more activated to vote, which is always exciting for someone that's been involved in politics since she's 14. But I think that it's important that we do continue practicing all of these things like social distancing. And, you know, for me, it's like, yeah, okay, hold on, we want to go back and we want to go out and see our friends, but we have to be extremely cautious. like, I'm not ready. Like, our county is ready to start like dine-in restaurants with like modifications and stuff like that. But I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Like, you know, I don't know. I don't know that we're there yet. So,
which city are you in, Andrea?
I'm in Chula Vista in San Diego County. Our board of supervisors is Republican controlled, and so it's all about opening up the economy. And I'm just like, there's still a lot of people that we need to make sure that it's safety first. So a lot of the city and the municipalities are taking a lot of precautions, but it's still very worrisome. So, you know, for us, it's very, a lot of the small businesses are taking precautions and all of that, but we personally need to take the responsibility to still do all of the things that we've been practicing and wear our face masks and, you know, do social distancing, because it's so important. You know, again, I'm lucky and I didn't, you know, have to end up in a hospital, and I had, you know, I had to use, you know, an inhaler and all of these things, but so many people had so much worse, and I wouldn't even wish someone a case like mine. And it's like, just please, you don't want to have this. And so that's my message to everybody, that you go out, vote, and make sure that we have competent people making laws.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And Theresa, Purse, doctor, Yaktown sister, even though you went to the school on the other side of town, that don't really matter, but, you know, I love you. I love you. Bring us home. Bring us home.
So first, I do want to say that we do need to have a separate show on health disparities amongst low income and minority.
Will do.
That is a completely different topic and is so prominent right now. This is, I think, bringing it to the forefront because so many people are realizing that your health actually is your wealth. I talked to the medical examiner the other day, and 90% of the patients that are passing away in the area where I'm in have at least one comorbidity. That means they have either diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, things that patients would normally come into a doctor's office visit and say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, my pressure's a little high, you know, or my sugar's a little high, but, you know, that's it. That's not it. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to, as health professionals, to convey to the patients why it's important to control these numbers, because you feel great until you don't.
Right.
So what we didn't talk about with COVID is what it does to the body and how it causes this, a lot of inflammation in the body. So we're seeing patients with bilateral, meaning on both sides, pneumonia, to the point where their chest x-ray is completely whited out. When it's air, it's black on an x-ray, but their x-rays are completely whited out. It's causing kidneys to fail, liver enzymes to be elevated, heart muscle dying, like all of these things are happening. So like, I'm just urging people to take care of yourself. You only get one body. I love now that everybody is buying a bike and out riding bikes and walking. I mean, these are things that needed to happen. What people don't know, most people, you lose 10 pounds, your blood pressure will come down 10 points. Like, change the way we eat a little bit. Moderation. You can eat what you like, but you cannot eat bad all the time. Try to practice 80-20. Treat yourself sometimes, not all the time, because you might feel great and you might just kind of be going along, not paying attention to your body. When something like this virus hits it, you will know every one of the disparities that you have. And these, you know, I think this is one of the reasons we are seeing it so much with minority populations, is just because we have had so many health disparities over the years, which are now coming to light. It's hitting them harder, us harder, you know. So I just want everybody to take their health serious, get active. Do not let, you know, the sedentary lifestyle turn into a couch potato because we have to be in our homes. Don't let that get to you. Fresh air and sunshine will take you a long way, but still practice your social distance. Still wear your mask properly over your nose and your mouth, because you still want to make sure you're protecting yourselves and other people. That's how we're passing it too, is because I've tested a number of people who have absolutely no symptoms and they're positive. And when you come into contact with many of our loved ones who have these comorbidities and you give them the virus, you know, you're going to feel horrible, because when they are sick and in the hospital, you can't call them, you can't talk to them, you cannot advocate for them, and you can't even go to their funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So remember those things. I tell people that all the time. And I had a big thing on Facebook when it first started, just advocating and telling people, you know, a lot of the young population doesn't understand COVID. They are still out, no social distance, no mask. They think it's not affecting them. And I had to tell them, I'm intubating young, healthy Black males at a disproportionate rate. And I need you to know that. You know, like, I just need people to take their health serious. I do think that there will be a second wave, much worse than the first.
Yeah.
It's going to be mixed with flu, and we're not going to know. It's COVID flu. And like, I don't even know like what direction that's going to take us in, or what that means. Mm-hmm. So people have to practice these precautions. It's going to be very easy when things open back up, because we've been in the house for so long, for people to just run out, want to see everybody they know, want to have a backyard barbecue, a block party. Please do not do that. It's going to become, we did see a couple instances where we traced it back to like kids being at a house party and the whole house party is positive.
Wow.
This is in the New York area?
That was in Detroit.
Oh, in Detroit. Okay. Right.
So, you know, it's happening everywhere. And I think sometimes if you don't see it, then you don't let it hit you the same way. Mm-hmm. Just log on to Facebook and you'll see everybody talking about another funeral, or another person that just passed away, or another person that just, you know, tested positive. So it can be you. That's what I tell people. It can be you.
Thank you so much, Theresa. So we're going to have to wrap up, and I appreciate you all coming on to Marnese Live Talkshow. So Andrea, continue to be safe. Good luck with your campaign. Thank you, Michael, for coming on and
thanks for
all the information. Caleb, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And I'm definitely going to highlight the Healing Collective. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so the Healing Collective is something that kind of came through COVID. The funny thing about that is that one of the things we talked about during COVID is that there was this expectation of, you need to come out this greater person. You need to be working on these things. You need to be doing all that. And so if you would have asked me at the beginning of this, that my friend and I, Charlie Pleasant, would have put together a mental health platform, I would have said no. But the Healing Collective is a community platform that we have on Facebook. We do a different topic every Wednesday, and every Wednesday we have a different guest therapist. So for example, yesterday's topic was domestic violence during COVID. We talk about the health symptoms, but what a lot of people don't realize is that what we talked about in that particular episode, during quarantine, you now have people who are stuck in the house with their abusers. Right. And that leads to a whole nother level of things. And so we take on a different topic every week and talk about the intersection of COVID. It is a place of community. It is a safe space to talk. And our goal is to at least provide, you know, some advice and some resources and some solutions. We're every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on Zoom and Facebook Live. This Wednesday's topic is actually parenting during COVID. So a lot of people have become stay-at-home moms and teachers, and you know, you're used to sending your kids off at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and seeing them at 3, 4 o'clock in the evening, and now you are with those critters 24/7. And so just trying to figure out what that looks like. So we have a great therapist coming on next week to talk about that subject.
All right, thank you, Caleb, and thank you so much, Theresa, for coming on. So I want to say once again, thank you so much for coming on to the Marnese Live Talk Show, and I look forward to having you all on again.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Marnese, I did forget to say, for those who want to hear more of what is actually happening during COVID, I am publishing a book later this year called COVID Diaries. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, that's good.
Awesome.
Awesome.
That should
Thank
be
you
good.
so much. And I look forward to purchasing it and highlighting it on the Marnese Live Talk Show. Got to have you back now, Purse.
Yep. And just very quick my website is africanhistorynetwork.com. I didn't give you that earlier, africanhistorynetwork.com. And I forgot to say, my daughter's 3 years old. I have one daughter.
The 3-year-olds.
Yep.
Thank you all for coming in.
All right.
All right, thank you so much for the fruitful conversation with Theresa, Andrea, Michael, and Caleb. I want to highlight some awesome work that's going out in the field. So tune in to Saturday Night Stories on Facebook, streaming every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's centering one theme, 5 storytellers, and 7-minute stories. So tune in Saturday nights for Saturday Night Stories. And if you're interested in purchasing any new books, we have a lot of time to read and do some self-evaluation. Please look for this on Amazon. I'm going to shout out Demar Bias, and he has 2 books that you can purchase on Amazon, like I said. The first is My Unbiased Opinion, The Enemy is Inner Me, and the second book is Self-Evaluation, The Art of Self-Care Devotional. It's an uplifting, insightful guide to self-empowerment and self-improvement in every area of your life. It gives you practical instructions with biblical backing to create a better, more improved self. So please buy his 2 books on Amazon. And I would like to invite you to be a part of the Marnese Live Talkshow on next week. I will be interviewing 8 fathers for Happy Father's Day, which is coming up in June. And we will talk about Father's Day and the role fathers play in the Black community. So you can also subscribe to the Marnese Live Show on YouTube, follow the Marnese Live Talk Show on Facebook, and also on Instagram. Have a wonderful weekend and continue social distancing.